Hey guys, welcome back to the garage, and today we're going to be going over the top 5 best off-road modifications you can do to your first gen Tundra. Alright, my number one modification, which it should be for everyone's off-road build, is going to be wheels, tires, and suspension. So most people decide to go with a 33-inch tire. Now there's a couple things to consider with the first gen Tundra on fitting 33-inch tires. One would be your upper control arm, and with the offset of your wheels. The stock offset with the 33, depending how wide it is, it could rub that upper control arm and you won't be able to fit it. Actually, the problem I had on mine, so I have to run 1.5-inch wheel spacers on it, and I didn't have any issues after that on the stock wheels. But I actually swapped my stock uppers for some aftermarkets now, and it's even better now. Now, if you were to run a skinnier 33 or a 32-inch tire, you could keep the stock wheels, stock offset and everything, and you won't have any issues. It's possible with a 33, a 255/85 on a 16 or 255/80 on a 17. You could get some rubbing on either the frame or possibly that front bumper. Now, stepping up to a 35-inch tire, most people I've seen had to tub the body, so that's a whole lot of work. So if you want to get into that, you can, but I would probably suggest for your first round, probably going with a 33 and probably sticking with a narrow one to begin with. Now, I have run 35-inch tires on my truck. I don't have them on there right now. In fact, they're right there. But I was actually able to run 35-inch tires without tubbing. Of course, I have the front bumper off, and I trimmed the pinch weld back. But these 35s are only 10 wide, so I know these are Interco Super Swamper SX2s. So they fit with no problem. I did do an extended bump stop just to keep them from coming up too high and possibly interfering with anything, but I've wheeled this thing a bunch with those and I never had any issues with rubbing. I know, I believe Mickey Thompson makes a 255/85 17-inch tire, which that's going to be a 35 by around 10 or so wide. That would be interesting to try out on these trucks, as well as Kenda also makes one that's similar to that, so 35 by 10.5, I believe. So I believe you can run those without issues. Now, moving on to suspension, I wouldn't call myself an expert in the suspension. I've run a few different setups on this Tundra, and honestly, they've all worked well. I started off with just a spacer lift on the stock suspension, and that was fine. Of course, you're not going to be vomiting through the desert or being very comfortable driving really fast on fire roads or anything like that, but just your normal speeds, overlanding or whatever you do, a spacer lift is perfectly fine. From that, I went to a cheap little coilover lift. I believe it was a Rancho lift. That was fine as well. And then now I've gone with the Old Man Emu 2.5-inch lift, and that works great as well. So, I mean, you can go pretty hardcore with the suspension and do long travel, or you could do a mid-travel lift or spacer lifts. Honestly, they all work. It just depends on how nice of a setup you really want. All right, my second off-road modification is going to be rock sliders. These trucks have a somewhat long wheelbase, and for me, I took it out and I didn't have rock sliders on one of the first times I went, and rock came up and smashed the bed panel a little bit. So yeah, I've used my rock sliders a lot. They are definitely useful. I've pivoted off trees, pivoted off rocks, slammed the whole body down on rocks plenty of times, and they just have been a definite must if you're going to get into any sort of off-roading that's anywhere difficult. So, all right, the number 3 modification for me is going to be skid plates. Now, these trucks come, I think some of them come with stock skid plates, and I ran that for a little bit and it was fine until one day when I was driving through the Ozarks and I got stuck in a mud hole, and my buddy pulled me out backwards and it just ripped the skid plate off, just completely bent it in half. It's completely useless at that point. The stock skid plates, unfortunately, they're very thin metal and they're not going to hold up to much. So that's why I upgraded to the Skid Row skid plates. I did the front skid and I also did the oil pan skid plate, and I've had no issues with those. I've definitely hit them on a number of things, scraped them on lots of rocks, gotten stuck in mud holes and they haven't ripped off. So I can definitely attest to those being important, and they work really well. And my number 4 best modification, which this one is probably my personal favorite, is going to be a rear locker. I tell you what a huge difference it makes in having a rear locker in these trucks. Wheeling these things when they're open, it's miserable, honestly. I mean, especially if you're wheeling with guys, everybody that has Tacomas or 4Runners, I know not all of them, but a lot of the guys with Tier D off-road models, pro models, things like that, they have rear lockers and 8-track and everything like that. You're just gonna get left in the dust. And that's what was happening with me, wheeling with guys who had lockers, and I couldn't get up on these different obstacles that they could just easily walk up. So putting a rear locker in this has just dramatically changed the capabilities of this truck. For me, I put a lunchbox Lock-Right locker in this. I have a video on some more details of that, but that was such a great upgrade to do. I think it was only like, it wasn't that much to do it. It's a whole lot cheaper than doing an air locker or an e-locker. I know those are more convenient, but for the money and for what it does for you, the Lock-Right locker is definitely the way to go. And my 5th and final modification is going to be bumpers. So for me, I know I don't have a front one, but I've kind of done my best to take mine off and get clearance, and then I built my own winch mount, and that has worked really well. Of course, I would like to have a front bumper, but as we all know, they're expensive, and I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. And honestly, I think the rear bumper is probably more important. These trucks have enormous hangovers in the rear. If you've looked at Tacomas, they don't have as much of a hangover, or these other trucks, they don't have as much, but these trucks just have an enormous one. And that was one of the first things that I smashed on this truck. I was wheeling at an off-road park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I came off an obstacle. It caught that rear bumper and ripped it halfway off. It also damaged some of the bedside, and I knew once that happened, I had to upgrade. So for me, I've still gone the cheap route, and it's not the best, but I got a buddy who knows how to weld, and we bought some square tube and just welded it in 3 places and cut off the bed sides, and hey, I haven't hit it since then. So it's done its job. So I would definitely recommend bumpers, especially the high clearance in the rear. All right, and that's going to do it for this video. If you guys are interested in more stuff like this, please let me know. I'll have more videos coming out on the 1st Gen Tundra, as well as some videos on the Samurai and the Toyota axle swap I'm doing on it. So if you guys have your favorite modifications or things that I may have missed, let me know in the comments. Go ahead and please like, share, subscribe. I really appreciate it.